Shalom, and welcome to Who is Yahuah. Thank you for joining me as we gather today's portion from the scriptures. Today's reading is Barashyth, Genesis chapters 38 through 40. Barashyth, Genesis chapter 38. And it came to be that Yahudah left his brothers and turned aside to a man, an Adalami, named Cha'irah. Yahudah saw there a daughter of a Kani named Shu'ah, and he took her and went into her. She conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Ar. She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Aunan. She conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shalach. He was at Kazib when she bore him. Yahudah took a wife for Ar, his firstborn, and her name was Thamar. But Ar, Yahudah's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of Yahuah, and Yahuah took his life. Yahudah said to Aunan, "Go into your brother's wife, marry her, and raise up an heir for your brother." But Aunan knew that the offspring would not be his, so whenever he went into his brother's wife, he spilled it on the ground to avoid giving offspring to his brother. What he did displeased Yahuah, so he took his life also. Then Yahudah said to Thamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shalach grows up." For he thought, lest he also died like his brothers. So Thamar went and dwelt in her father's house. After some time, Shu'ah's daughter, Yahudah's wife, died. After Yahudah was comforted, he went up to his sheep shearers at Thamnathah, he and his friend Cha'irah, the Adalami. It was reported to Thamar, "Your father-in-law is going up to Thamnathah to shear his sheep." She took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, wrapped herself, and sat at the entrance of Ainim, which is on the way to Thamnathah. For she saw that Shalach had grown, yet she was not given to him as a wife. When Yahudah saw her, he thought she was a whore because she had covered her face. He turned to her by the way and said, "Please let me come into you." For he did not know she was his daughter-in-law. She asked, "What will you give me to come into me?" He replied, "I will send you a young goat from the flock." She said, "Will you give me a pledge until you send it?" He asked, "What pledge should I give you?" She answered, "Your seal, your cord, and your staff in your hand." So he gave them to her, went into her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose, went away, removed her veil, and put on her widow's garments again. Yahudah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend, the Adalami, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. He asked the men of that place, "Where is the cult prostitute who was beside the way to Ainim?" They said, "There was no cult prostitute here." He returned to Yahudah and said, "I did not find her." Also, the men of that place said there was no cult prostitute here. Yahudah said, "Let her keep what she has, lest we become despised. I sent the young goat, but you did not find her." About 3 months later, Yahudah was told, "Thamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the whore and is now pregnant because of it." Yahudah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." As she was brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law, "By the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant." She added, "Please examine whose these are, the seal, the cord, and the staff." Yahudah examined them and said, "She is more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shalach, my son," and he never knew her again. When she gave birth, there were twins in her womb. During the labor, one put out his hand, and the midwife tied a scarlet thread around it, saying, "This one came out first." But as he drew back his hand, his brother came out, and she said, "How have you broken through? This breach be upon you." He was named Pharah. Then his brother came out with the scarlet thread on his hand, and he was named Zerach. Barashyth, Genesis chapter 39. And Yahusaph, who had been taken down to Matzrimah, Phutyphar, an officer of Pharah, captain of the guard, Amatzri, bought him from the Yashma Alim, who had taken him down there. Yahuah was with Yahusaph, and he became a prosperous man, dwelling in the house of his Matzri master. His master saw that Yahuah was with him, and that Yahuah made everything he did prosper in his hand. So Yahusaph found favor in his master's eyes, and served him. His master appointed him over his house, and entrusted all he had into Yahusaph's care. From the time he made him overseer in his house, and over all he owned, Yahuah blessed the Matzri house for Yahusaph's sake. The blessing of Yahuah was on all that he had, in the house and in the field. He left everything he had in Yahusaph's care, not concerning himself with anything except the bread he ate. Yahusaph was handsome in form and appearance. After these things, his master's wife lifted her eyes toward Yahusaph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to her, "Look, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has entrusted all that he owns into my care. No one in this house is greater than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against Elohim?" Though she spoke to Yahusaph day after day, he did not listen to her, nor would he lie with her or be with her. One day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the household were inside, she caught him by his garment and said, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand, fled, and ran outside. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, she called the men of her house and said to them, "See, he has brought in a Hebrew to mock us. He came to lie with me, but I cried out loudly. When he heard me raise my voice and cry out, he left his garment with me and fled outside." She kept his garment with her until his master came home. She told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant you brought to us came to mock me, but when I raised my voice and cried out, he left his garment with me and fled outside." When his master heard his wife's words, saying, "Your servant did this to me," his anger burned. So Yahusaph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he remained there. But Yahuah was with Yahusaph, extending kindness to him and granting him favor in the sight of the prison warden. The warden entrusted into Yahusaph's care all the prisoners in the prison, and whatever was done there was his responsibility. The warden did not oversee anything under Yahusaph's hand, because Yahuah was with him, and whatever he did, Yahuah made it prosper. Barashyth, Genesis chapter 40. And after these events, it came to be that the cupbearer and the baker of the sovereign of the Matzri sinned against their master and the sovereign of Matzri. Pharah was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Yahusaph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned Yahusaph to attend to them, and he served them. They remained in confinement for some time. Then the cupbearer and the baker of the sovereign of Matzri, who were confined in the prison, each had a dream in the same night, and each dream had its own interpretation. When Yahusaph came to them in the morning, he saw that they looked troubled. So he asked Pharah's officers, who were with him in confinement in the master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" They said to him, "We each have had a dream, and there is no one to interpret it." Yahusaph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to Elohim? Please tell them to me." So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Yahusaph, saying, "In my dream there was a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As it budded, its blossoms came out, and its clusters produced ripe grapes. Pharah's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, pressed them into Pharah's cup, and placed the cup in his hand." Yahusaph said to him, "This is the interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharah will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will place Pharah's cup in his hand, just as you did before when you were his cupbearer. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Mention me to Pharah and help get me out of this house, for I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and I have done nothing here that they should put me into this dungeon." When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Yahusaph, "I also had a dream. In my dream, there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head, and the top baskets were all kinds of baked goods for Pharah, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." Yahusaph answered, "This is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharah will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from you. On the 3rd day, which was Pharah's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants. He lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that he again placed the cup in Pharah's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Yahusaph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Yahusaph. He forgot him. Thank you for joining me to gather today's portion. May we continue seeking Yahuah through his word and growing in the knowledge of him one day at a time until Yahushua gathers us. Shalom.